Good morning. Hey, today, as we take a moment or two to chat a little bit, I wanted to mention something. I'm going to be in the book of Daniel for just a minute, Daniel chapter 9. But before we get there, I just wanted to mention this Sunday is our Friends Sunday, and I want to encourage you to pray. Everybody should pray that God would bring people and get visitors into church. And then that the tracts we pass out would find the tender heart. There are people. I remember one guy came to our church, and he just loved it. And I said, "How'd you hear about our church?" He said, "Oh, somebody." And he told who. Somebody just came by knocking on doors, and he said, "I just can't believe that no one came by sooner." And I said, "Wait a minute." And he'd been coming for I don't know a few weeks at least, maybe a few months. I said, "Wait a minute. I know where you live, and I know we've gone through that neighborhood on several occasions knocking on doors. So somebody's knocked on your door." He said, "Well, I got to admit, I found 2 or 3 tracts on my door, but I didn't come until someone personally invited me." So it's not that we hadn't been there. They hadn't been home. He was saved already. He and his wife. Kids got saved and baptized here, and for many years served here until they moved out of the area. But understand that there are people moving into our community right now. Lots and lots of people. I drove on Saturday up to Riverside, actually downtown Riverside, to see one of our good men in the hospital. And I'm driving up the 15 freeway, and there are so many homes being built. And then you get up to Dos Lagos. You that know our area know where that is, north of Tom's Farms. And there's apartments, hundreds of apartments, beautiful apartments. I'm going to guess very expensive apartments. And then coming home, I went to downtown, and I came down the 60 and the 215 and through Moreno Valley and Paris in that direction. When you go from that down that 215 all the way to Murrieta, and you that don't know our area, we live here, and then there's kind of the eastern freeway 215 breaks off, and then the west goes by Wildomar right here on the 15, and that goes to Riverside. This goes to Corona, and then they meet on the 91 crossing. But this freeway here, there are several 100,000 people, and there's a struggling Baptist church in Paris. There may be one in Sun City, a struggling Baptist church, but with all the several 100,000 new residents through Menifee and out toward Winchester in that area, there is very little. I don't believe anybody. I think you could probably say, go back the last 3 months or 6 months, and probably nobody's knocked on a door in all those new homes. And the need is great. And there's so many people, but there's people in our area, apartments being built just down the road from a town of 1,000 in Wildomar and 1,000 in Murrieta. There's a new apartment complex being built in Murrieta, 3-story apartments, and it's huge. There'll probably be 1,000 people in that one apartment complex. I don't know that, but it's big. But pray. Would you just pray? Those people need to hear the gospel. Those people need to get saved. I'd like them in our church. We'll have to have 6 services on Sunday, and I don't know what we'll do the rest of the week, but we could, I guess, build a new building or just go outside. We could do something weird like put up a tent. But when we start thinking about the people, pray. So this is Friends Sunday, and the next week we're having an old-fashioned Roundup Sunday, folks. Folks love to dress up in their Western gear. I think it's an excuse to wear jeans and a T-shirt or a flannel shirt to church, and whatever works. But we have kind of a fun day and extra fun music, and that'll be the day we have our best beard contest prizes awarded, and it'll just be a fun day. But those days, pray. First of all, pray that God would help people come across our tracks or find us online or whatever, not find all the critics and the junk. But pray. And secondly, invite somebody at the grocery store, somebody at the bank, doctor office, dentist office, whatever, the person who does your hair, barbers, whoever. But invite somebody. Ask God to help you have a friend on Friends Sunday. And that would be this coming Sunday now. And just pray. First, we need prayer. We want God pleased. I just know this, when I go by an apartment complex with hundreds of apartments, and I think there's 2 people or more in each of those apartments, possibly solo, a single person in them, but mostly it's going to be two or more people. I think, do they love God? Is there anybody in there that loves God? Is there anybody in there that looks up at the star-lit sky and says, God, what a great God you are? Where I am in our bedroom, we have a huge, huge window in our bedroom, and we put the bed right up almost, just where you could walk between the window. And I can lay in bed with the curtains open. We're second floor, we're above everything. And I wake up early, and I look out there and see those stars and think, what a God. What a God I serve. But most people don't give God any attention. They don't give God any credit. They don't give God any praise. They don't give God any thanks. They don't give God any glory. And they're not bad people. They're just living a life like they were brought up without God. And we need to introduce them to God. And these are days, there's a lot of God and Jesus being pushed out into the media, and I thank God for it. And they may not all be explaining the gospel, but at least they're getting the names familiar. But would you pray and talk to people? Openly talk about Christ. Don't be embarrassed. Just talk about him. These are good days, and we ought to be doing that. So, and I hope you'll pray. And then Thanksgiving Sunday, the Sunday before Thanksgiving, we'll be out in the community having church services all over. Pray for that day. Pray we'd get to the right spot. Pray the devil wouldn't get policies by apartment owners or HOA people, whatever, that limit us. We have been in a park giving away groceries and turkeys and preaching just a simple salvation message, a simple message of why we ought to be thankful to God, and had somebody come by. You don't have a permit to do this, and just pray, because we want to get out and get the gospel out. That's what we want, and we want to preach everywhere we can. So pray, if you would, that we could be a help and that God would get the glory. That's what it's all about. It's not about our church or some other church. It's about the Lord being loved, as I talked about on Sunday. If you weren't here on Sunday morning, I talked about what's God's purpose and plan. Number one, he wants to save you. Why does he want to save you? So that you and him can get to know each other. So you would follow him and learn about him and love him and become his friend. And then third, so that you could then become a servant. And there was more to it than that you could serve him. Follow me and I'll make you to be fishers of men. And again, I skipped a point or two in there, but that's the nutshell. You go back and listen to it. But I want to read a verse in Daniel. Just quickly, Daniel 9. Now this passage, Daniel 9, is one of the most clear-cut and deliberate prophetic passages of Jesus coming again and when the triumphal entry would take place. And how did those wise men know to come from the east, and the star, and how did they know that star had any bearing on anything, and all the question marks? Well, this is one of the passages that made the Jew as well as the people in Daniel in Babylon know of when the Messiah would be coming. Remember, Daniel, he wrote this over in Babylon. He was a captive, and he was a ruling captive, but the Jews were still there as captive. There's no record that Daniel came back to Jerusalem when they came to rebuild it 70 years later. But he has been reading the book of Jeremiah. He realizes there's 70-year captivity and on, and he's praying. And God gives him opens his eyes to some divine revelation. And so here in Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, it says, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people. That's tribulation. There's 69 weeks, and then there's the 1 week would be the tribulation. And I won't go into a whole lesson on that. But in verse 25, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince. So when Cyrus gave the command to go and rebuild Jerusalem, and you can read about that in Ezra and Nehemiah, to the Savior, the Messiah coming, he's dating. He's clearly dating. We know these people knew when the command was to go back and rebuild Jerusalem, and then they could count the days and to know when Jesus would come, or the Messiah would come. And so from the going forth of the commandment, it'll be 70 weeks. 70 sevens is 490 years. And the street shall be built again in the wall, even in troublous times. Verse 26, I'm in Daniel 9:26. And after 62 weeks, okay, the Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. So he takes that 70 weeks, and now he begins to break them down. And he said there's a point right here when the Messiah will be cut off, but not for himself. The Messiah, the King of Kings, the Lord of Glory, he will be cut off. And what a prophetic statement that the Messiah would be cut off. Remember, one of the priests they were discussing. The priests were angry at Jesus beyond words and trying to figure out how to kill him. And he said, "Don't you know that one must die for the sins of the nation?" I mean, he knew. And it might have been this passage. He didn't say how he knew that, but it could have been easily been this one, that he knew the Messiah was going to be cut off, that there's going to be a day when the Savior, of course, to the Jews, they don't call him a Savior, they call him the King, the Messiah, the one who would come back and rule, the Christ. Now, there's a lot of prophetic thoughts in here, but let me just take a devotional thought from it. The day of Jesus' crucifixion was a tragic day. The disciples cowered and of course, were ashamed. The few disciples that stuck close by were scared to death, weeping, brokenhearted. The women that followed Jesus were brokenhearted, weeping there at the cross. Jesus looked at his mother and said, and told her that, I want you to stick with this to one of my friends. They'll take care of you and you take care of her. And it was a horrible day. And I'm sure that the people of God sat back and thought, all that we dreamed of, all that we hoped for, we were sure he was the Messiah. We were sure that he was going to save us. Now, there are the Jews, these Old Testament Jews, which is what they were all the way to the book of Acts. They were Old Testament Jews. They were not looking for a heavenly city coming down from heaven as a bride adorned for her husband there in Revelation 19, 20, and 21. They were looking for the Messiah to come back and rule on earth and set up an earthly kingdom and kick out Rome. And they knew that would be the place that the world would be ruled from Jerusalem. And it will be one day. But they were sure Jesus, remember the disciples or the apostles in Acts chapter 1 said, "Wilt thou this time set up thy kingdom?" He'd risen from the dead, been with them for 40 days, and they said, "All right, this is it. Are you going to set up your kingdom now, Jesus?" And he said, "No, you guys don't have this thing figured out yet. You just go preach. And you let me worry about when I'm coming back to set up my kingdom." And he is going to come back and he is going to set up his kingdom, but he's got a whole lot more stuff he's doing before that day. But here's the point. There were some people whose hearts broke, some people whose dreams were shattered. There were people who were very much assured in their hearts of what was right and what was true. And that day, it all fell apart. And that day, they didn't know where to turn. It was hopeless. It's like everything was gone. But that day did not happen without God's knowledge. We're here in probably about 500 BC, 520 BC, somewhere in there. I'd have to look it up to know. But Judah was carried captive around 586, and it was a 70-year captivity. So that will put it down to 516, and depending on when all this happens. So 500, 520, 530 BC, Daniel is getting word from God that the Messiah is going to be cut off. Now look, let's go up here to the cross. They're heartbroken. They're shocked. Their dreams are shattered. Their hopes are dashed against the rocks of reality. And back here, 500 plus years before, God said, that's going to happen. It's got to happen. This is important. 500 years earlier, God says the Messiah is going to be cut off, but not for himself. He's going to be cut off for the sins of the people. The world needs him to die. And so 500 years earlier, God already announced and put it into the scriptures so everyone would know that he knew that Jesus would be crucified. You go back to Psalms 22, again, written by David. That was some years before Daniel, many years before Daniel. And David wrote about his hands and his feet being pierced and his side being pierced and blood and water pouring out and the people gambling over his clothing. I mean, Psalm 22 tells the story of the crucifixion just perfectly. And it's all laid out. And so we could go all the way back to the time of David, or we could go here to the time of Daniel and know the cross was no surprise. The cross, the wickedness of crooked men. Three times Pilate said he's innocent. One